You're watching a replay of Brain Drain with Rich Cabaceres. For more videos just like this, hit that red subscribe button.
And good morning, you're listening to Brain Drain on the legendary 1480 WSAR. I am Rich Cabaceres, coming to you live in your ears from WSAR.com, Spindle City Auto Glass Studio Cam, from Facebook Live's J&J Jeweler Facebook Live feed, where you can comment below, join the conversation. Tune in radio all over the country, 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or the airwaves in southeast Massachusetts, all the way to Cape Cod, all the way to Rhode Island, and up into the Boston area. So good in Boston, and he's talking about the trips that people go on in the name of government. That's right. There are certain elected officials, and a lot of elected officials who were elected in the state of Massachusetts, who are going on these trips to the Azores and to Israel and all of these places in the name of government. And by the way, it's not reported on their OCPF accounts. It's not considered a campaign contribution, even though these organizations that are donated are places like Luso American Foundation and the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Boston. Now, here's my question. Why aren't they going to places like Iraq or Syria, or places that are war-torn, or places that are impoverished? Why are they continuously going to these lavish spots? As somebody said in the article that Mike Baudet wrote, why don't they go to places like Hoboken, New Jersey? Sorry about you guys who are out in Hoboken, New Jersey listening to this right now, but why don't they go to places like where you're from? They go to these lavish vacation spots, they have tons of fun, and they maybe do a little bit of work. And the question is are they doing work? So I think ultimately we have to have the conversation. Are they representing us? Are they truly going out there representing us, or is getting elected to any state legislature just like being in a country club, right? You get to vote yourself pay raises. You get to get away with just having conversations but not writing really any policy. You get to go on these lavish vacations that are paid for by people other than you, and by the way, it doesn't pop up in your campaign finance report, so you're not going to really be questioned about it. So what can we do to fix it? And what do you think? So I'm going to pose the question to you, everybody who's listening today. I'm going to pose the question to you. Call in. Tell me, what has your state legislature done for you lately? What has your elected official done for you, your local state rep, your state senator? What have they done to make your life better? And I'm not just talking about individually you, because sure, if you call your state rep or your state senator, they may get something done for you individually. But what policies have they worked on? What policies have they passed to make your life better? Now, let me use one example here from where I'm from, which is the city of Fall River. In the city of Fall River, we had these things called spaghetti ramps that connected 79 to a bridge, and that bridge was the Braga Bridge. Now, these things were literally falling apart and had to be replaced. So, when we ripped them down, guess what happened? We had to put a new one up. But unfortunately, what ended up happening is these state legislatures who were in our area said, this wouldn't have been possible without us doing our work. Well, how about this idea? How about the state had to replace it anyway? And you, state legislature, are just taking credit for something that was going to get done anyway. You could have put 3 monkeys and a dog in the spot, in your spots, and would have gotten that job done. So the big question is, what are you doing to change society? I don't see anybody working on welfare reform. I see very little work on healthcare reform. I see very little work on things that impact people's daily lives. And when you walk around the streets, when I talk to people off of the air, the first thing that's said is they feel that nobody is representing them. How are you helping the person who's trying to get off welfare and trying to find a job that isn't minimum wage so they're making less money? I think those are the important questions that we need to start asking of our state legislature, and that's all over the country. Now, one thing that's very interesting is a caller from California pointed out that in California, in order to vote for a pay raise, in order to get a pay raise in the California state legislature, the voters have to vote on it. Do you think that they would have gotten a pay raise in Massachusetts or some of these other states where they're voting themselves pay raises if voters had to vote on it? And then we bring in, why are these states majority controlled by a party? It's because of the gerrymandering of the political party. So really what happens when people get elected to the state legislature, it's like a country club. They go in, and as long as they don't make too many waves, as long as they do just enough to be relevant, they're going to stay there for as long as they want to. How do you feel? And we are talking about your state legislature. What are they doing to make your life better policy-wise? We're going to be going straight to the lines. You can call in 508-673-1480. The lines are hot right now, so we're going to go right into it. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Remember the pay raises they gave themselves in Massachusetts here? What was it, $23,000 a year?
Can you believe that? Can you believe that state legislature? Yeah. It's crazy.
I know. Well, it's crazy because these people keep voting those people in.
Now, let me ask you a question. That equated to something like, let's see, maybe a 40% pay raise, 30% pay raise for a lot of these folks?
Yeah.
When was the last time you got a 30% pay raise? Really? Really? They're supposed to be representing you. Shouldn't they be dealing with some of the same things, or are they just too far removed that they don't understand what you're really going through?
Well, when they gave us, this tax cut they gave, well, that's crumbs. Well, what are we getting? I guess Nancy Pelosi was right. It is crumbs what we got.
And the funniest
compared to what they get.
The funniest part about it is a lot of these people who are in state office are the ones who are criticizing the presidency or criticizing Congress, but are doing the same exact things that they're saying that those folks shouldn't do. Like, for instance, in Massachusetts, a lot of them are criticizing Donald Trump taking credit for things that he hasn't done, and they do the same thing at the State House.
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
It's like I said before, you can tell they're lying when their mouths are moving.
Thank you so much for your call.
Okay, buddy.
Have a great day. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Yeah, it's a topic close to my heart.
What say you?
I'm all right. The representative I have is the perennial unopposed representative from the south end of Fall River.
Okay.
And he recently, I guess, took a trip to Israel. And instead of describing what was the purpose of the trip or, if there was going to be any benefit to the area, he spent all his time on the air complaining about the food.
Well, tell me what purpose did that serve?
Tell me.
So are they also going to go to Palestine and see what they're living like over there? Are they also going to do that? Or are they going to also go to Lebanon and see what they're dealing with over there? I don't think that's happening, are they? Because they're worried about maybe getting shot. But they're going to these destinations that they would want to go to on vacation anyway.
Yeah, and this particular individual was on the air. One time he was on the air tearing apart the two-party system, both Republicans and Democrats. And then later on, he was on the air schmoozing Bill Keating from the Cape, And this guy has a ready-made constituency because he's president of one of the neighborhood associations.
How about that?
Which is a conflict of interest to begin with,
And I know exactly who you're talking about. And I'm going to reserve my personal opinion on this particular gentleman because I have some, but maybe we'll talk offline about that. But that being said, when we're talking about this, you think about somebody or people who could be working at the State House to develop legislature to make your life easier. Instead, what are they doing? They're going around and they're saying, oh, well, I'm having conversations with people. Well, having conversations with people is great. If I want to have a conversation, I'll have one with my sister. But if I want something done, I don't want to just have a conversation with you to feel better. I want you to do something about it.
Hey, dig this. I wonder if holding up placards for Kafuri qualifies Kathy Ann Viveras for a $40,000 raise a year.
Have a great day.
Take care.
You're live at the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Hi, Rich. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. I'm going to be the devil's advocate.
Sure.
And just say that our state legislature, they're responsible for being our mouthpiece. You know, they communicate to the state
Okay.
what demands we need. And if they're not going to be there to advocate for the needs that we have in particular, and looking at a city like Fall River, those needs are great. So
Right.
without them as the mouthpiece, we're not going to get the piece of the pie that we need.
All right. So you're from Fall River, Massachusetts, which is poverty, like right in poverty. When you look at the median income of the city, they are in poverty. So the big question is, what legislation is your state legislature passing to make your life better?
Well, I can tell you that I'm involved with the Katie Brown Educational Program,
Okay.
and every time I speak with him, he's a huge supporter of the organization. He's a huge supporter of getting funding for the organization.
Okay.
He has done a ton of advocacy for law enforcement.
Okay.
He has done a ton of work in terms of advocating for youth programs. I'm not on his campaign committee. I can't tell you everything that he's done, but I can tell you that Mike Roderick has done a lot to this community.
Okay.
And I think that it would be doing a huge disservice by cutting down based on one policy that you are not really particularly appreciative of. It really does a disservice because the work that they're doing is very valuable.
So you bring up some good points. Now, I want to point something out. In Massachusetts, the state budget is $39.4 billion. Billion with a B. Okay? And when you look at how much money that actually translates to in a city like Fall River, it's minuscule. And I know people say, well, majority of our education is funded by the state. But when you look at the need, it's not enough funding comparatively. And when you start looking at how education...
Comparatively, we have a whole lot more funding than most communities.
Yeah, and
you've got to look at it relative to the other communities.
Because Massachusetts is the type of state where everybody's God-given right, if you live in Massachusetts, is to have an equal education. And that is not happening any longer. Now they're trying to change how net school spending is calculated, and they're getting pushback from state legislature. Tell me why that exists. Because right now, when you look at...
I can't speak to that, but I can tell you that I will call my state senator and I will have a conversation with him about it.
But the question do these conversations actually turn into anything? Because what I see a lot of people taking credit for things that they haven't really done. And, you know, one thing that I can say about the person that you're particularly talking about is he got half $500,000 for police and fire for overtime. But that being said, that number has been decreasing, not increasing. So tell me, and the person you referred to is one of the leaders in the Senate. So tell me, what can they do to change things like welfare, to help people get jobs? What can they do to change things like health care so people have easier access?
The question is, what can we do to help and support those programs, and how can we work cooperatively with our state senators?
But isn't that their job?
Accomplished?
Isn't that their job? Isn't their job to make life better for everybody that they represent, regardless if they're having a conversation or not?
Of course it is.
Right. So ultimately what we can do is we can vote for somebody who is going to do that.
Yeah, that is our right. But
so
I'm fairly confident in the job that my state senator is doing.
And I think that's fair. I think you pointed out some concrete factors. But I think when you look at especially the position of a state senator, they have more than just one individual city. So their job specifically in the state Senate should be passing legislation and helping to create legislation because their area is so wide. State representatives, I think, should probably spend more time in the regions. But they should still be working on legislature too because that is their job.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your call.
Take care.
Have a great day. And we are talking about your state legislature. And we're talking about an article that just recently came out talking about all the trips that they take to places like Israel and like the Azores and various places in Europe. But my big question is, why aren't they going to places like Afghanistan, where a lot of the National Guard of the states that they represent are at right now, or were at one point in time fighting? You know, when I was actually in Baghdad, I got to meet some of my congressmen and some of my senators. Let me tell you some senators that I had the opportunity to meet. John Kerry, John McCain. I got to meet Condoleezza Rice at the time. right? And she wasn't a senator or a congressman, but she was, at the time, part of the cabinet. So let's take a look at the representation and how people are putting their boots on the ground to see what's actually going on to help their country, and then what's actually happening for kind of a vacation paid for by some lobbying group. And if you miss the days of delicious feast food of the summer, visit Avo's Feast at 1601 Pleasant Street in Fall River, Massachusetts, so you can have the chorizo and cassoulet sandwich that will make your life complete again. The new spicy garlic aioli sauce is delicious and can go on anything. So you need to get your friends, your family, your loved ones over to Avo's Feast on 1601 Pleasant Street. Go over there, have a local brew, have a great meal. Tell them that we sent you, and you won't be sorry you did. We're going to go back to the lines. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Oh, good morning, sir.
How you doing?
Hey, Cox Communication out. So I'll call my state rep.
You know, well, how about this? I know you've criticized your governor's words before, and you live in Rhode Island. You've criticized your governor's words before.
Go ahead.
Now, do you think that your state rep is going to start lobbying for states or cities to not be able to create deals with cable companies, so that way there aren't monopolies happening in every single city and driving the cost up for the people that they represent?
I have no idea.
Right, because that could be solved at the state level, right? All they would have to do is say at the state legislature, we are not going to allow monopolies in individual cities anymore. Regardless of how it benefits the city themselves, it's not benefiting the people. We're not going to allow that to happen. That's something that the state legislature in any state could work on right now.
Well, I have to say my state rep is a pretty good guy here. And if you call their office and you don't get results, then I would be on here complaining, obviously.
Well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
When you call them, they're great people, and they want to listen to what you have to say. The question is, are they actually doing anything about it? Are they actually...
Absolutely. I mean, I have results. I mean, there's complaints. I'd like to hear them today. Because he's a Democrat, I mean, he's probably just a treasonous. So, we live in this country where, you don't get results. It's pathetic.
Now, here's a question for you.
Go ahead.
Now, is a result something that relates directly to you, or is a result something that benefits the entire constituency?
Well, I would imagine everybody has some kind of issue when it comes to state issues.
Okay.
If you do, it wasn't only me. These are issues that... unemployment issues and stuff like that. I mean, that's what they're there for, man. That's what they're there for. So,
well, actually, no, they're there to pass legislation. They're there to approve or deny governor's budget. That's what they're there for. They add all this additional constituent service stuff to kind of save their jobs, but realistically, what they're there for is to make your life easier on the policy level.
So you're having a state issue to a veterans issue or unemployment issue. You don't go to your state rep?
Usually, everybody should have access to
solving. Who do I call then?
All right, so ultimately, you should be able to call the agency without your state rep calling on your... No, here's the thing.
I ain't going to get results by
right.
calling SAR.
So here's the process. Regardless of who you know or who you have to call, everybody should be able to solve these issues without having to call the state rep. Everybody should be able to solve them on their own. The issue is the system is set up in such a way when a state rep calls on your behalf, it's more likely to get done.
I can't even call today. I have to use a track phone to call out today.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to tell you something.
Yeah, and the big question is what is being done to solve your entire town's...
Yesterday they were talking. I tried to get on Flanagan's show, but I was too late. But with welfare, wasn't Bill Clinton put some as a federal? What happened to that? Welfare. He reformed welfare. Bill Clinton did.
So ultimately,
I don't know, because I've never been on welfare. I'm not going to go criticizing someone else that's been on welfare. So, I'm just saying, what happened to that? There was like a work thing.
And it's funny because we've talked about welfare here in the past, and unfortunately what ends up happening is...
Did Obama cancel it out?
Here we go. So you got to let me finish my statement because I'm allowing you to finish yours.
Because people were kicking me off yesterday.
Right. So ultimately what happened...
I actually know a wife who had 7 children, whose husband was military, who she got away from because he was abusive, and she had to move to another town.
All right.
And raise her 7 children.
And you know, there's a
on
lot
welfare.
There's a lot of situations that are exactly like that. And unfortunately, what happens is welfare is a trap, right? Welfare is the type of thing where if you're making minimum wage and you can't afford health insurance, the only way that you're going to be able to make a living is on welfare. And then when you try to get off welfare, the first thing that's going to be available to you is a minimum wage job again. And then when you go to that minimum wage job, you're going to be making less than you actually did on welfare. So welfare is a trap in order to help bolster a bureaucracy, and that needs to change. And you know who can help change that? Your state legislature, your congressmen, your senators, your legislative groups at every level can help change that by simply working together and focusing on the people they represent. You know why they focus on constituent services like helping you out if you have a veterans issue or helping you out if you have an issue with some social service company? Because it's the easy job to do. That's the low-hanging fruit. It's a lot harder to go into the State House or go into Capitol Hill and say, I want to change welfare. I want to change veteran services, because that requires work, real work.
I understand. Listen, I got to get off because I only have so many minutes on this prepaid job here.
Well, thank you for calling in and spending some of your minutes with us.
You're welcome.
Have a great day.
Take care.
And, you know, I think a lot of times what happens when we refer to our state representatives and state senators, what do? We talk about the things that they've done for us directly or the people that we know directly, but we don't talk about the legislation they've passed. We don't talk about the things that they've done to make the situation better. Why? Because it's not happening. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Yeah, Rich, I hear this yesterday with the welfare on Flanagan's show and this one now. You know, you are right. It's a vicious circle. However, why aren't our state delegation working to subsidize those people that are taking that minimum wage job to make up some of the difference? Okay, and if they're getting $800 a month or $1,000 a month on welfare with no job, then they go out and they do get a minimum wage job. Well, you know, if they need $400 more a month, give them $400 instead of $1,000. But we don't do that.
You know, it's funny because subsidized work is something that's happening in other countries, and it's working very, very well because it's helping people transition from welfare to actually getting a job. Because you can't just throw people off welfare and say, well, you can do community service, because they're just going to move.
I wish the legislature would tell us what's the problem with doing that.
Right. And
why aren't we doing something like that, both state and federal?
You're right, because a subsidized work program would help people transition from welfare to actual work.
Well,
and unfortunately what happens right now...
Everybody's answer seems to be, we'll keep raising the minimum wage. Well, small business is taking a hit constantly on the minimum wage.
Well, you're taking a hit, too.
Yesterday afternoon on the Flanagan show, they were saying, well, you know, somebody on welfare might be getting $800 a month. Well, guess what? If they're getting minimum wage, they were saying you'd make $800 a month on minimum wage. That's not the case. Minimum wage is $11 an hour. That's $400 a week, $1,600 a month. So, you know, you can't keep going to the business and ask the business to take care of what our legislature should be helping with. And I'm totally against this welfare system.
So here we go. So if you let me elaborate a little bit, and then I want to hear your response to both things that I point out. So first, you're right. If we could subsidize workers when they go to work, they would be more likely to continue staying at work. Unfortunately, when somebody leaves welfare, the first things that they lose is daycare for their kids, health care, and the EBT. So then they're making less money than they did. And the second piece, you talked about raising minimum wage. All that's really doing is making everybody else around them poorer. Because if there's a minimum wage increase from $11 an hour to $15 an hour, that's a $4 an hour raise. But if you're making $19 an hour, you're going to get that $4 an hour raise that's going to be $23 an hour. But percentage-wise, you're making less of an increase than the person who made the increase off of the minimum wage. So really, you're getting poorer and poorer.
Minimum wage goes up. If they're getting $20 an hour, then they should get that raise.
But
minimum wage, and I don't agree with that.
But even then, if you get that raise, you're getting a $4 an hour raise, which is percentage-wise less than the minimum wage increase.
Yeah. Well,
so all it's doing is making people poorer.
Yeah, and as far as kids on daycare, also get tired of that. Welfare. Well, they get more welfare if they make another baby, and that gets to be sickening too. So it needs to be looked at with that. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day. So somebody on Facebook says, ask why more people don't run for office, any office. And that's a great question. Why are people not running for office? A lot of it is this campaign finance thing. If you're somebody who's working minimum wage, or if you're somebody who is on welfare trying to find a way to help the majority of people who live in a municipality who may be on welfare, help those folks by advocating for them, you're going to have to go out and raise funds. And it's going to be a lot harder for you to raise funds than somebody who's part of the good old boy system. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm calling on behalf of our state legislators because I work closely with most of them all the time.
Yep.
And I do mostly health care. And I don't know, I was listening to you on the way in. I just got into the pharmacy. It takes an awful lot of work to get a bill passed. I don't know what specific thing we're looking for with any of our state legislators. I mean, you could get a state legislator from Boston passing or proposing a bill that would help every single healthcare person in Fall River, whether it be a hospital, a nursing home, a pharmacy, chiropractor, whatever. And they work alongside with that one legislator, and they spend hours and hours and hours working, compromising, rewording, refiling, I mean, it's a tough process. I mean, I think in all fairness to our legislators, you should have someone call in from the legislative's point of view on how much work it takes to pass a bill. I have personally asked all of our state legislative delegation to help pass bills pharmacy that help each and every person that has to take medicine. And let me tell you, sometimes it takes a couple of years to pass a bill because they have to work so hard on getting one piece of legislation passed. I mean, it's difficult.
Now, here's a question for you, because I understand.
Yeah.
But here's a question for you. Do you think that we need to work on things like welfare reform? Do you think that we need to work on things like making sure that people have access to the services that are going to help them survive? You're in the healthcare industry. Do you think that we need to make sure that people who can't afford to get healthcare, who are working every single day and working hard, should have access to that healthcare without having to lose their entire wage? Do you think those are things that should be done?
Well, those are two entirely different issues.
Right. And
as far as welfare reform goes, I mean, and I'm not a legislator, I'm a person, I can give you my opinion. We have far too many people on welfare that are very capable of working, and if I were doing welfare reform, I'd get those people off of welfare, get them into a job, and get them back in the system, because the ones I see, some of them are just too lazy to work, and they're just bleeding the system.
Well, how about this? And this may be a baffling statistic, but people who live in the state of Massachusetts, which I know you live in, people who live in the state of Massachusetts on welfare make per hour, if they were working, I think it's $15 an hour more per hour than they would actually working a minimum wage job because of benefits and things like that. Isn't that something that we need to fix?
Definitely, we need to. I mean, I've had people go to CNA schools, go to BCC for 2 years. Technicians go to school for 2 years. They come out. They've been on welfare. They wanted to go to work. They start going to work, and they find out that welfare gives them far too much money. They pay their rent. They pay their food. They pay their utilities. They get part of the bill back. I mean, they have to quit their jobs because welfare gives them far more than what any company can give. And I mean, if companies have to start raising wages to overshadow welfare, then again, the middle class the you and I's of the world are going to far get higher prices and less services than everybody else. I mean, you can gladly say, let's raise the minimum wage to $15, and that sounds like a great thing, but in essence it's not, because all that does is pass all of that thing back onto the consumer.
I agree. And
it's detrimental to us. It's a hidden tax. And minimum wage, I mean, I'm in my 70s. Minimum wage, when I was working, meant to be a minimum wage. It meant to be what you did to start out, how you worked yourself, how you presented yourself to the general public, how you learned from your bosses, how you learned to handle finances, how you learned to count change, and you worked yourself up to a working wage. So now they want a minimum wage to be a working wage.
You know, and I think you bring up a great point, and I want to thank you there because we do have to go to a commercial break, so thank you so much. I really appreciate your points.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Thanks.
And one thing before we come back from the break that I want to point out is I want to make sure that this doesn't turn into people who are I want to make sure that this doesn't turn into class warfare, because unfortunately what happens is when we talk to our state legislature about this, they say, well, the poor or the rich or the middle class, we need to start talking about the actual issue. And the welfare system, the way that it's set up today, is to force people into a system that they're reliant on the system itself, right? Because you're going to make more money on welfare. If you're making $37,000 a year right now in the state of Massachusetts or California and you need to get health care, guess what happens? Call up your welfare office and say, hey, I only need Mass Health. I only need whatever California's equivalent to Mass Health is. Guess what happens? They're going to tell you to quit your job and go on welfare. We're going to go right back to the calls. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning, Rick.
How you doing?
Good. You talk about welfare, and yeah, there's no question. I don't think anybody wants to be on welfare, but what about political welfare?
I think you're right. So political welfare, a great example of that is the people who are going on these trips. We had one state senator who went on 28 trips paid for by these lobbying groups since 2014. 28. That's
Mark Pacheco. Yeah, he goes 7 times a year.
Well, no, that's considering that we just started 2018, it's more like 9 times per year.
9 times a year. If he was in my district, I'd vote him out.
Can you believe that? 9 times a year.
I suggest that he go into the travel agency business.
Maybe that's where he's going to retire to.
I'm serious, because he probably knows more about getting to the Azores than a travel agent.
But
that's sad. That's truly sad. I mean, that's an embarrassment to his district.
Well, I'd say it's an embarrassment in the entire state, or any state that's doing this kind of it almost seems like pay for play, right? Because, again, why aren't they going to places where their National Guard is serving and running the risk of getting shot?
Right.
Why aren't they doing that?
Right. When he goes to the Azores, does he come back and tell his constituents what he did there?
Well, yes, they do. They talk about all the great food that they did, and they talk about the fact that they sat down at a table.
That's not doing anything for his district. I mean, if he wants his own food channel, then he should subscribe to some network and be a guy who tells you about food from the Azores. But to go on the taxpayer's dime that many times to the Azores, that's a travesty, Rick.
And this is something that's happening in every single state, where there are these politicians who are taking advantage of the system and not really representing the people that they're supposed to represent. That's part of the actual problem. Because if they wanted to do something, they would focus on actually passing legislation, instead of just giving the tidbits of low-hanging fruit by helping out with immediate constituent services, right? Work on things like welfare reform. Work on things like healthcare reform. Work on things like legislation that is reducing the wage gap so everybody is helping to live a little bit more. Don't just pass the idle, minimum wage is going to go up to $15 an hour or $11 an hour just because it's the low-hanging fruit.
Right, exactly. I agree with you.
It's crazy. And we accept this as part of the job. But thank you so much for your call, because there are people on the line.
No problem. Take care.
Have a great day. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning, Cavaceres. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's another busy day. I'm getting ready to head out. I hear you with all this low-lying fruit. I want to go for one of these top apples right now.
Okay.
And if this is the dream list of what our local government or state government can do, what about doing something for fathers' rights?
Okay. And what do you mean?
Family court.
Okay.
There needs to, I've been involved with it throughout the whole life of my daughter. I know a lot of people, and there's a lot of good dads that want to be dads, but because of the way the system's set up, we're not able to.
And, the courts are something that is they have to follow state laws, they have to follow federal laws, but really it's the judiciary who help kind of make sure that people are getting the rights that are due to them. And I think you're right. If there were some state legislation that could help protect everybody, but the big question is, and a lot of times it's not just fathers' rights and mothers' rights. You deal with things like
it's the kids' rights.
Well, you deal with landlord.
And sorry, I don't mean to overstep you, but I'm very passionate about this.
I'm just finishing my point real quick. So it doesn't just deal with father and mother's rights, but also you can talk about landlord-tenant rights, employee-employer rights. There's a whole bunch of things where trying to find the happy medium is very, very, very difficult. What say you?
I agree with the tenants' rights. I think that's more of a local issue when it comes to how the local Board of Health departments deal with themselves. But when it comes to kids' rights and fathers' rights and mothers' rights, I think there should be a lot more open possibilities towards joint custody so these kids can see both of their parents. I know I've been on both ends of these spectrums. Love my mother with all my heart. Been through 3 divorces. Me personally, I'm not allowed to see my daughter as remotely often as I want to. And a lot of that is because, you go in front of a judge. The judge tells you, nope, we're not going to give you joint custody. You get to see your kid 1 day a week and pay your child support, be happy, live your life. And it's completely unfair because, in my opinion, from my experience, you have a whole generation of kids that were brought out of that equation. And now the fathers, they want to be there for their kids because the fathers weren't there for them.
We got to go to the news break. Thank you so much for your call. Thank you so much for your points. Have a great day.
You too, Cabassos.
Thanks. So, something that I want you to think about during the news break is, our state legislatures all over this country are going after the low-hanging fruit, and why aren't they working on things like opioid reform, healthcare reform, welfare reform, homelessness, right? We have all these different things, and unfortunately there are very little bills that are put out because, unfortunately, people don't want to be seen as targeting the poor or targeting the rich and running this political slander. And we are going to dive back into the conversation. We are talking about your state legislators. Around the country, what are your state legislators doing to make your life better? And this is spurred by a conversation that happened in Boston, Massachusetts, where they pointed out that, and this is by WCVB in Boston and Mike Baudet, who says that there are numerous state elected officials who are going on trips to various parts of the world paid for by lobbying groups. And the big question becomes, is this representing you? Some of these lobbying groups are the Luso American Fund and the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Boston, who are paying for these trips. And one state senator went 28 times since 2014. Is this part of helping you have a better society, or is this them taking care of themselves? Is this like them giving themselves pay raises? Because there are some states that the voters have to vote for their legislature to take a pay raise. And if you're in a state like Massachusetts, they just give themselves pay raises willy-nilly. They gave themselves 20%, 15%, 25% pay raises. That's like you going to work and saying, hey, by the way, I want a pay raise. And I don't just want any pay raise. I want 15%. And by the way, boss, you don't have a right to tell me whether I should take it or not. And the justification? Oh, well, this is the only way that we're going to be able to keep people working for us. Well, you know what I say to that comment right there? Test the market. If you think that you need a 20% pay raise to do your job, then quit your job and allow somebody else to do it. Because at this point, as state legislatures, or as state legislators, what have you done? We have welfare, which is really, really ruining society. More people are being pushed into welfare because they can't afford things like health care. And when you try to call and you're a minimum wage working employee, you're above, you're making $15, $16, $17 an hour, which is enough to just barely get by if you're living on your own or if you're living with a spouse. And then you try to call and get health care because you need it, because you're sick. You know what your state is going to tell you? Quit your job. How about that? Quit your job. And then when you get on welfare because you needed to quit your job because you were sick, you know what happens? You're ostracized. You're called lazy. You're called stupid. You're called all these names just because you had to get help. So we ask why the system is set up this way. I think it's because of politics as a whole, right? I think it's really because the Republicans are looking to benefit the ultra-rich and the Democrats are looking to help people who are ultra-poor. And everybody in between gets the scraps. Everybody in between gets the scraps, right? Let's look at this recent tax reform that was done. Benefits the rich, helps the middle class, helps the poor at kind of an equal rate. But the rich are really, really benefiting from this. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. What say you?
How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
You know, everything you just said is happening right here in Fall River.
And elaborate, please.
Well, Kathy Ann Viveris and the other person, I can't remember her name, they just got massive pay raises. Based on what? I would never get that kind of a pay raise my whole life.
You know, I think that's a fair point. When have you ever received a 20%, 25% pay raise? Ever?
Never. I never will.
Yeah, right. Unless
yet I have to pay for all of this, being a taxpayer.
And no additional duties, right?
And not to mention that those people are unelected officials to boot.
Yep. Well, that's patronage in its finest. And you know what else is patronage? When you're an elected official and you vote to give yourself a raise.
So if people really want to understand what's going on in this country, they should read Fruit from a Poisonous Tree by Melvin Stamper.
Yeah, I think that we need to really, really, really start evaluating what state legislators all over this country are doing to make a difference.
Well, they're really not making a difference for the average person. They're making a difference for their own pockets.
I think that's fair.
Right now, this country is being prepped for a nice fleecing, and we don't even see it coming.
And there's no better indication of that than these trips, these lavish trips that they're going on. And as somebody said in the Mike Baudet article, as somebody said, why aren't they going to Hoboken, New Jersey? They're going to these lavish spots where they can sit back, relax, and have a great time. Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day. You're live at the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning. I just wanted to make a comment on the welfare estate. I lived on North Main Street in Fall River, which is right next to. I had a perfect view of the welfare office, and these people would get out of Jaguars and walk into the welfare office, and I just wanted to comment on how outrageous it is to just to see that and see what the people that. You know, 350 pounds. She had the Section 8. She was on disability, and we're paying for. She's on disability because she has asthma, apparently.
Now, I want to be careful again because I want to make sure that this doesn't turn into wage warfare. Now, a lot of times what happens when people are getting out of the Jaguars is one of two things. One is they have a spouse who may be selling drugs or doing something under the table, or two, they ran up their credit because they just renewed their credit, so they have new furniture in the household, they have a new Jaguar, they have all this stuff because they have new credit, where they're just going to lose that stuff a year from now because they run out of the ability to pay for those things. And then they have to wait to file bankruptcy and go through the entire process again to do it again. And unfortunately, it's because of this ideal system where people think that you're not something unless you have a nice car or unless you have a nice set of furniture in your house. There's these bogus ideals about what makes you a good person. So there's two different reasons why that could be happening, and I'd argue that both of those cases are the people who are the victim are the people who are on welfare and everybody else in the state, because if there was some type of transition system to get people off of welfare so they can get a job that paid the bills, they wouldn't have to work minimum wage. They wouldn't have to sell drugs, right?
Right. I don't know what that program was that they said you're not going to be able to collect unless you work. Like this woman that lived downstairs from me, we're giving her money because she's disabled because she has asthma, but she's buying cigarettes with the money that we're giving her. It's just like it's a vicious cycle, and it's such a broken system.
And I think that's something we have to analyze. How do we fix the system? And isn't that the job of your state legislature? Isn't that the job of your congressmen and your senators?
Right.
And they'd rather work on constituent services as opposed to making your life easier as a whole.
Exactly. And what do we do? What can we do? The only thing we can do is have a voice and vote.
Yeah, you got it. But here's something very interesting. You know what would save you a lot of money in taxes? If they figured out welfare reform, because more people would be contributing to the system as opposed to taking from the system.
It's so desperately needed.
I agree.
And I appreciate your voice. I really do. I enjoy hearing you. And you have great ideas.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Have
a great day.
Thank
you for the call. Have a great day. I appreciate your opinions.
All right, bye-bye.
You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning. Good subject.
Thank you so much.
Welfare, definite a problem, but you're dealing with it well from a certain point of view, but that's just a symptom. You're not dealing with the cause of the problem, and the cause of the problem is shipping our factories overseas to low wage level employees, minor work rules, no environmental regulations trouble them over there. We've shipped our source of wealth away. And of course we have people on welfare. Don't blame the people on welfare. Blame the people who caused it. Right. Specifically, it goes back to the Rockefellers and the Bush family.
So I want to...
In the Bush family with NAFTA, which they passed off to Clinton because a Democrat could get it through Congress and make it a law. We've been going downhill ever since. George W. Bush isn't going to go against it, and Obama doesn't like this country anyhow, so he hypes it up, destroy America, and don't make it a great again. And this is it. We have to reverse, reimpose tariffs. In 1913, there was no income tax. Things were paid for by tariffs.
So
we've been destroying our country ever since.
You're right on a portion of it. You're saying that the whole problem is because of jobs, and I'd say that that's a portion of the problem. One of the big issues is there are jobs that are out there, and employers can't find people to work those jobs, and the reason is because of the welfare system, right? The welfare system is making it so people, instead of being helped to go get that job, they're pushed to actually sit back and work and collect on welfare because they need things like health care and daycare for their kids and all this other stuff. The other thing is the exorbitant health care costs that are pushing people into bankruptcy when they get a little bit sick, or welfare. What say you?
I agree with that. Yeah, you're right. But the reason that the people are staying on welfare is because of the competition in wages between ourselves and the people in China, like women jumping out of windows working for Apple to commit suicide because of their standard of living. We aren't paid enough relative so that we can afford to get off welfare. And that it goes to supply of labor, supply and demand labor.
You know, I think that, again, you're saying it's the entire reason. I'm saying it's a portion of the reason. I think we agree at least on a portion of it. So thank you so much for your call. Have a great day. And you make some very, very good points. I want to point that out. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing today?
Good. And yourself?
I'm doing great. What's up?
Okay. As far as welfare goes, do you realize in Massachusetts you can only be on welfare for 5 years?
Okay. And what about waivers?
What about waivers? That would only be in a case of disability.
Okay.
Okay.
Or if you're involved in a program, right?
No. You can only be on welfare for 5 years.
Okay.
And the second part of it, one of the problems that became with welfare was because SNAP doesn't come from welfare. But what they did with the health insurance, they actually penalized the kids of the families.
I agree.
They can't even have dental care. I don't know if you're aware of that.
So here's part of the problem. Part of the problem is what they're doing is they're removing the stuff from welfare to push people off welfare as opposed to just helping people get back to work.
I agree with you on that. Okay, if you recall, years ago, you used to have a program, CEDAR. Oh,
I remember CEDAR. I worked for CEDAR.
And your cities were much cleaner, your towns were cleaner, et cetera, et cetera. I think people on welfare that are capable of working should be put into a program like that and have to work so many hours a week for that check.
But here's the issue. The issue is that when they try to transition into real-life work, they're making less money than they did on welfare.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are.
Do you know how many children you have to get $800 a month?
But I'm talking about including benefits, including the daycare for your kids, inclling the health care.
Well, they don't get free daycare.
They do if they're trying to transition to school or something along those lines. So they do.
No, if they work, and if they're in college or they're in a training program, they have daycare.
So there was actually
but it has to be full time.
There was actually a study done by not me, by the Cato Institute that talked about every single state and the amount of money that people are collecting, including subsidies, who are on welfare. And in Massachusetts, they said after taxes it was $42,500. Before tax, it was $50,000.
$42,000 for how many in a family?
And they said on average. So the average family is probably 4 people.
Yeah, that's true.
All right.
And the other problem with the welfare system, which I thought was ludicrous that they got rid of, was the husband was not supposed to be living in the household, or a boyfriend. What they did was stop the social workers from going into them homes to make sure there was no men living in that household or no other person living in that household besides the number of people that were supposed to be living in that household.
So I just want to point this out because you said that people who are on welfare are making less money than if they went out and got a minimum wage job. And I want to point out that if that is the case, then if you were making $13 an hour, $14 an hour in the state of Massachusetts, call up your welfare office and tell them that you want health insurance. What are they going to tell you? They're going to tell you no. You have to quit your job in order to get it.
No, that's not true.
Yeah, that is true.
Depends on how much your income is.
Yeah, and it's above $18,000 a year, I think the number is.
That's higher than that. No.
It's okay, so it's a little bit higher. But ultimately, the system is set up in such a way where if you are poor, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to get the services that you need to not push you into welfare. The system should be set up in a way that it subsidizes you from transitioning from welfare to actual work. The issue is we turn it into an argument about people on welfare are lazy, people on welfare are this, people on welfare are that.
It's not true.
And
some are. I'll totally agree with that.
I agree.
Do you realize that in Massachusetts, a good portion of the people, especially in this city and New Bedford, are not originally from here? They come in from other states.
All right, so how about this? Majority of the people who live in every single state in this nation are not from there unless they're from the middle of the country in towns that are about 500 people.
Correct.
The majority of the cities in this entire country, majority of the people who make up that city are people who are not originally from that city. And if you can find a city, that is opposite that, please let me know.
I'm not disagreeing, but what I'm saying is not everybody on welfare is on it because they want to be. Most people on welfare and who use the services in this city from nonprofit agencies do not want to be on it. There are lazy people who never want to work. Then you have people who are addicted to drugs. And that's the big problem.
And I agree with you on the fact that majority of the people who are on welfare do not want to be on it, but unfortunately there is no way out other than
There is a way out. You're going to have to raise the minimum wage.
But the minimum wage isn't going to help it because all that's going to do is help make people poorer. Because the minimum wage, once that increases, the cost of living around everybody is going to then go up. So people
That's not true.
Yes, it is. And
because they can still get daycare.
This has happened every single time the minimum wage has gone up. When
well,
people
it's going to go up.
When people
it will be voted for.
When the minimum wage increases, what ends up happening is for a year and a half, people who get the increase feel great. They said, oh, wow, I'm getting a whole lot more money than I used to have. And then about a year and a half later, the companies start catching up. So the cost of the Whopper, the Big Mac, the cost of your bread, the cost of your milk, everything goes up because the cost to produce those things have then gone up. So those people who are now working minimum wage are just as poor as they were the day before. The only difference is the people who are close to minimum wage or even a little bit larger than minimum wage are now poorer than they were before that minimum wage increase.
I don't agree with that.
That's fair. And, you know, the beauty of being in America is we have the ability to agree to disagree.
I just believe that the people on welfare, to get them back to work, you do need more job training. There are no good jobs in the city.
So, and to your argument, if increasing the minimum wage is going to take people off of welfare, then how come every time we've increased the wage, the number of welfare recipients hasn't gone down exponentially?
I would have to look at that statistic.
All right.
But I do know you can only be on welfare 5 years in the state. That's a law.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Have a great day. And, you know, I think it's important that people call in and disagree with me. And there's a reason why that's important, because ultimately there are a lot of people who are listening to this show around the country. And when you call in and disagree with me, it is good to have that back and forth argument. Because at the end of the day, we need to hear multiple opinions. Brains are like opinions. Everybody's got one. I want to hear yours. 508-673-1480 to join the conversation. On the other side of the break, we will pick it right back up, and we're going to dive back into the vacations that our greedy state legislator are taking. We're talking about trips that our state legislature are taking. We're talking about what your state legislature is doing for you around this country. Are they working for you? Are they passing legislation that helps you? Are they helping with welfare reform, opioid reform, homelessness reform? Or are they looking to kind of fill their own pockets? What say you? Hello?
Richard?
Yes?
Can we touch on the travel by the legislators again?
Yes, we can, sir.
Listen, Mark Twain said, "He who does not travel reads only one book."
Fair.
Okay? How many times I've traveled all over the country at different affairs, and I always bring back good ideas for my business.
I think that's fair.
And I'm sure I've even spoken with the mayor about it. You know, we talk about a promotion of the city and things like that. We've got to send someone out to these trade fairs all across the country. If you remember, Mr. Aguiar got into a little situation because he went to a meeting in New York.
Well, I think it was because of lavish spending of staying at the Ritz-Carlton.
Well, the question of lavish spending, if that's where the meeting is, that's where the meeting is.
Okay.
You know, I've been to meetings in Boston. I've been to meetings in Atlanta. I've been to meetings in Chicago, all across the country. If that's the hotel you're staying in and it's $400 a night, that's the hotel you're staying in.
You know, I think that's a fair point. The question is out of all of New York, was the Ritz-Carlton the choice?
Well, that I can't comment on.
And that wasn't where the conference was being held.
But the idea that we should be out, we should have people out promoting the city, and as the legislators do, I'm sure when they went to Portugal, sure, they had dinner together and had a good time. Okay, we'll grant everybody that. Mm-hmm. When I go out to a meeting, we all go out to dinner. But, you know, sometimes the best ideas are the ideas you get over dinner.
I think that's a fair point.
Not at the formal sessions that you go to.
I don't think that's only a fair point. I think that you're 100% correct that some of the best ideas happen over dinner with collaborative conversation because it's tough to be the bad guy at dinner.
That's true. That's true. But so this idea, when Representative Silva was in Israel, I found all his reports fascinating. Because I know he called into several of the shows, and I have since spoken to him personally. I know they've traveled to the Azores. Every time he comes back, we're trying to do all this development in biopharmaceuticals. There's a large biopharmaceutical company located in Portugal, and they did some visitations there. And so they were able to bring some information back. So you look at it as, yes, they traveled to the Azores. Yes, the Azores is a beautiful place to visit. But if you bring some ideas back, and sometimes the idea is not for this week.
So the question to you, sir, is who then pays for it? Because right now we're talking about lobbying firms who are paying for these state legislators to go to places far away in these lavish spots to talk about things, and these are these lobbying groups who are focusing on helping that country, who a lot of times might be competing against another country. And furthermore, they're not reporting that on OCPF filings. That's something that's being separated, and they're allowed to violate, in essence, maximum contributions to campaigns by allowing these state legislators to go to these foreign places. Now, do you think taxpayers should be paying for that? Do you think that lobbying firms who are interested in certain things should be paying for it? Or do you think it should be the legislature themselves?
Well, let us come back to this example. If the mayor has someone from Fall River or the Fall River Office of Economic Development send someone to the Municipalities Conference of America, happens to be in Las Vegas this week.
Okay.
And we send a couple of people out there with a display, with things to give away, with some videos to promote the city. Don't you think the city should pay?
But that's for a conference. That's a different situation. This wasn't a conference.
Well, are they conferences or not? They're getting education most of the day.
And we're talking about one state senator who went 28 times since 2014.
Well, to the same place?
No, different places, but
well,
28 times.
He must have a vast amount of resource knowledge in his head.
And I get it. You're trying to look at the positive side of this, and there are some positives to be made of this. I want to be clear about that. There are some positives from our state legislature, whether they be state senators, whether they be state representatives, or any state legislature, whether they be in Louisiana, whether they be in Florida, Texas, Idaho, wherever they may be. There's some benefits for them going to other countries and seeing other things, as you said from the Mark Twain reference. That being said, should that be on taxpayer dollars, or should that be from lobbying firms who are looking for one slant of this entire thing? Because if they're going to go to, say, Israel, why do they not then go to Palestine and Lebanon? And why don't they go to Iran and Pakistan? And why don't they go to these? Why don't they go to these other countries that may not be as lavish?
I don't know if I'd want to go to Pakistan this week, if there was a meeting out in Pakistan.
I think that's fair. Thank you so much for your call, sir.
Okay.
And I really appreciate your points.
Okay.
Have a great day. And he brings up a fair point. Our people who are elected to office should be worldly, but the question becomes, who should be paying for it? And if there is a maximum contribution limit in your state, and people are allowed to skirt around that maximum contribution limit, are they then violating the law? Is this a pay-for-play system? Because we also have to remember that these state policies were written by the state legislature, right? So a lot of these policies that are written to enforce towns and city laws are not followed by the state. The state representatives and the state senators aren't included in those policies. In Massachusetts, we have the open meeting law. Right, but you see these state representatives and state senators having meetings at 1 o'clock in the morning to get things done overnight, so that way it's not that controversial. So really, when you ask yourself the question, why are they allowed to kind of pass this unchecked policy that benefits them and it forces people to live by rules that they're not living by? I think you have to look at the source. It's benefiting them. Right, so open meeting laws. So there's these trips, these lavish trips, to the way that things get done at the state level. It's scary, because really what they're doing is they're passing policy that benefits them in a way that it isn't benefiting other people. We can take a look at Congress, right? Congress cannot be charged with insider trading. If you go and talk to the CEO of GE, and the CEO of GE says that GE is going to create the first teleportation device, and you go and you buy GE because of that, you've used insider trading. You've used insider information to make money, which is against the law for you to do that. But if you are a Democrat or a Republican or an independent in Congress, it is not against the law. If you're a senator, it is not against the law. And we ask ourselves why people go into office and they're maybe in the 100,000 club, and then they become millionaires by the time they leave federal office. This might be why, right? So when you ask yourself, what is your legislation doing for you? Constituent service is the low-hanging fruit. You call in, say, hey, I got a flat tire because I hit a pothole. Can you call my city and help me get this tire fixed? That's easy. That's something that a phone call can fix. But fixing things like welfare reform, healthcare reform, homelessness, the opioid epidemic, fair wages, access to things like a social security system that works, proper disability, family leave, all of these things that should be getting worked on are kind of put to the back burner because what are they focused on? Making their paycheck, and the best way to do that is by making sure that you're going out there and saying, hey, this person helped me directly with an issue that I faced in the city. Because that is more likely to gain them votes permanently than passing some bill that nobody really sees up at the State House. But they should be doing their job, and we should be holding them accountable for that. And to pick it back up, I think it's important that we talk about why people feel that this is so, why we shouldn't have this conversation. And it's because of the time a lot of your state legislators are nice people, and they generally are. You meet them in person, they're nice to you, they listen to what you have to say, they make you feel warm and fuzzy, and that's great, because people who are elected to office should make you feel good, but the question is, what's more important? That they're going out there and they're passing legislation and voting for things that actually have an impact on your life, or that they're treating you nicely and voting themselves raises and going on vacation? You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. What say you?
And you can have a green melisada on me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Okay. So apparently it looks like we have people who don't want to join the conversation. Rather than join the conversation, they are calling in and making fun. So, you have the opportunity to call, join the conversation, 508-673-1480, and tell me what you really think about your state legislator, your state, whoever that may be. If it's a Democrat, if it's a Republican, tell me what they're doing. Because, they make a lot of money to just go around and show up at places. But is it about just showing up at places, or is it about actually getting things done? Because around this country, and it's not just the state, it's also the federal level, around this country, we're dealing with issues like welfare. We're dealing with issues like healthcare. People are being trapped. People are being stuck to only go one way, and it's poor if they get sick, if they are making too little of an income. And they're being forced onto things like the welfare system. So the question becomes, what do we do to fix it? Isn't it the job of our legislation, the people that we put in office to represent us, to fix the macro economy, as opposed to showing up to my garage door opening? What say you, caller? Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
How you doing?
Yeah, you got cut off a minute ago. I don't know what happened.
Sorry about that. So what's up?
Yeah, my wife's sister was here visiting from Fort Lauderdale, where she lives, last summer.
Okay.
And she's saying there's notices in Spanish in the supermarkets down there that says, need help, go to Massachusetts for the best benefits in the country.
So, it's one of these things where if you want to move to one of the top 5 states who's providing welfare, people are doing that. But there's also people who are moving to places like Massachusetts and places like New York to get jobs. So it's happening on both fronts.
Okay, that's a good point. I have a real good friend who's a Massachusetts state nurse and working in the mental health area. And she says that if you knew the amount of money that goes to illegal aliens for health care in this state, she says there would be an uproar.
Now, to be clear, it doesn't go to them. They actually go to the hospital to get services, and they actually don't end up getting paid for. That's ultimately what they're talking about, right?
That's what she's talking about.
Right.
You go to those people that had drug problems, this and that, and they wind up in the mental health area, and they just get free health care.
Yeah,
so,
I think it's important that we start figuring out a way to help people actually get employed, to help people kind of have an opportunity to become legal if they decide that they want to become legal, or documented, whatever term you want to use, and that is the job of the legislators. And
there's a lot of jobs which technical type jobs, carpenters, this, that. You look in the newspaper, you see ads all over the place for carpenters, plumbers, helpers, electricians. Those are good paying jobs. And if there were technical schools for those jobs that people could go to, that maybe that would help fill that void.
I think you're bringing up a fair point that ultimately there are jobs out there. People just need to ultimately take them. The issue is transitioning from something like welfare to an actual job is very, very difficult. Thank you so much for your points. Have a great day. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning. Hello.
Yeah, Rich.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Not bad. What say you?
Yeah, I'm saying that I think there should be term limits on representatives and just about every political office there is, because they get embedded in there and you can't get them out, and then they're giving themselves 40% pay increases for doing nothing, really. And I got to agree with what you had said earlier.
So it's funny because one of the things that people say is based on the way that it currently is, where there's a lack of accountability for our state legislators. Even if you have term limits, the person is going to leave and it's just going to be replaced by a person who does the same exact thing, because that's seen as the status quo. Now, the question becomes, what happens if the people who vote people into office start holding them accountable? Start saying, hey, we don't expect you to just show up to my garage door opening. We want you to start working on the real issues that we face, as opposed to this political pandering type thing that happens right now. When that gets fixed, then term limits may work. But unfortunately, if you replace them every 4 years, 8 years, whatever it may be, all that's going to happen is somebody else is going to do the same exact thing that the person did before them.
Yeah, I can agree with you there, Rich. It is a good idea.
And unfortunately, what happens when somebody goes in there with a ball of fire and they want to actually start fixing things is the state legislators, who have kind of made their living on doing nothing, fight against them and ultimately try to push them out of office.
Yeah, well, I don't know where the fix is going to be, but there's got to be some type of a solution to get this fixed.
Yeah, I think the solution is we need to kind of have regular people start running for office again, like it used to happen. But unfortunately, big corporate money and big kind of Massachusetts, big California, big Minnesota, and every big kind of wealthy people put the people that they want who are going to conform to the status quo.
Yep. I agree with you, Rich. You're on the right track. Stay with it.
You got it. Thank you so much for your call.